This is Holly Benton from the Orthodox Christian Leadership Initiative. Happy to welcome all of you here for our third series of Leading Your Domestic Church in the Days of COVID-19. I'm happy to have Lindsay Maria Birdsall with us this evening. She's from St. Michael's Church from Louisville, Kentucky. She's the youth director there. She's a high school teacher and also the mother of a 5-year-old. And we're so happy to have you here tonight, Lindsay, with us.
Thank you. All right, everyone, Christ is risen.
Indeed, he is risen.
So we just had a very unusual and blessed Pascha, and we are about to get back to our regular pattern of school. Hey, buddy, you can sit here until Daddy tells you it's time to go to bed, okay?
I'm waiting until he's done going potty.
Okay. So anyway, our regular pattern school these days includes a lot of time on screens and probably more than is good for us. So the question that I'm asking today is, how can we use our God-given talents and exercise our God-given bodies before we lose our minds? And listen, I'm not here to demonize screens or technology. Thankfully, I'm very thankful for it. Like, we're here sharing together today because of technology, and I'm very grateful for the connectedness that it does bring us. But I think, as we all know, it's just not the same. We had Pascha this weekend, and I was so grateful to see, my priest sharing the light with, but it just wasn't the same as being there. So this is a beautiful opportunity for us to really enrich our time with our families, enrich our experience in our home. So exercising our bodies, I'll talk about that first of all. The scriptures say that our body is a temple. That's 1 Corinthians. And also that the eye is the lamp of the body. That's Matthew 6, the Sermon on the Mount. And our faith is incarnated in the way we use our bodies and the things that we look at and the things that we devote our time to. All of these deeply impact our walk with Christ. And lots of academic disciplines, from anthropology to education to behavioral economics to family counseling, similarly suggest that the skillful management of our attention is a marker of the good life. And it is a key to improving virtually every aspect of our experience. So I wanted to share with you a book that I am going to be drawing from today. Is one called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And he writes this book based on his own experience in tech, and he just has really come to understand that deep concentration is very, very valuable, and it makes our lives meaningful, but it's also very rare nowadays. And it's a great book because I think that in its own kind of like psychological and sometimes even economic terms, it expresses a lot of the deeper truths of our faith. If you visit a monastery, you see the monks praying silently to themselves, using the Jesus prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And you see them praying that to themselves silently as they are going about their work, and they are trying to achieve, this state of concentration, of true presence, and awareness of their bodies, about all the beautiful blessings that God has brought into their lives. And this is a book that I think reflects those truths, but I guess in a layman's kind of terms. So I really appreciate it because of that. So the book recommends deep work, and it defines deep work in this way. deep work occurs when we concentrate on a task that is both challenging and inherently beautiful and meaningful. And especially when we have developed a high level of skill that we can put to use in a way that is totally engrossing, okay, but doesn't require too much thought, but it's still totally engrossing, we enter into a mental state called flow. And we're very mindful of the sensations involved in the task at hand, but all distractions, everything that's irrelevant to the task at hand, all worries are completely blocked. And, psychologists have been able to demonstrate that having these experiences of flow, it's just very, very beneficial to our mental health, and I would extend that, it's going to be beneficial to relationships in our families and the way that we can communicate our family values. So flow is a term that has also been used to refer to this state. And it was coined by a Hungarian psychologist named Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I did my best with his name. And he actually was defining it in the 1960s. And he studied the creative process. And he also found that in addition to this, intense state of concentration and the pleasure that was experienced by that, in that state of concentration, he also found that the artist would lose interest after the project was completed. And it was really highlighting the importance of enjoyment in the process and not necessarily the end result of the product. And he defines flow as concentration that is so intense that there is no attention left over to think about anything that's irrelevant. So what is flow? He has actually 5 different conditions to define flow. In order to achieve flow, 1, you need to be engaged in a task that you find intrinsically rewarding. Okay, so we would say that this is a task that we would consider to be good with like a capital G. Okay, so for our children, that's the kind of task that I would say is very beautiful, and they see as something that God just looks down on and delights that is there in their life. It's not going to be easily achieved. I would say flow is probably not going to be achieved if they only think of that activity as being important for their resume or for their college applications, right? In order to achieve flow, number 1, it needs to be a task that you find to be intrinsically rewarding. Number 2, you need to have clear goals and a sense of progress. 3, the task needs clear and immediate feedback. And 4, the challenge must match the skills of the participant. So really, all of these requirements show that in order to achieve flow, we need a sense of personal control and agency over the task. Our coach or our parents, they might be able to help us choose an appropriate skill level to be working at on a task. But at the end of the day, especially as a child matures and they're able to, they've developed metacognition, they can kind of think about their own thinking a little bit more. They're really going to be some of the best people to determine that on their own. So this is really going to require us with our children, if we're going to encourage them to have a state of flow and an activity that is engrossing for them, it's going to require that we give them space. So they have that sense of agency. initiative in the task. So how can we achieve this in our families? I mean, I would like us, first of all, to think about, do we have a task like that in our lives right now? And, I have to say that there have been times in my life where I have found it harder to be in touch with that kind of a task. And, young babies, they're very demanding, toddlers, very demanding. So I don't want people to be hard on themselves, because when you're short on time, it can be hard. But I would encourage every parent to do their best to find this state of concentration, because I believe that this state of concentration really it's akin to prayer. It's the kind of mental state that really could open us up to deeper concentration, better prayer, fewer worries, and really put us at peace and in a place to be the leaders of our home. So I think that would be the first question is, do you as a parent, do you have any flow experiences? And some of those might change over time. Like when I was a teenager, a flow experience for me was participating in theatrical productions. And that is not going to happen at this stage in my life. And I'm okay with that. I've moved on. But at the same time, I think it's important that we find our own outlets, So one thing that's developed for me is I've noticed that I experience lots of flow when I get to prepare for the holidays. Like for Christmas and Pascha, just the baking and the preparing of beautiful things around the house. That is my flow. And that was a huge blessing for me during Holy Week and now in Pascha. But there are things that you can do as an adult that maybe you remember doing as a child. Maybe you could pick up that instrument. Maybe you could sing a little bit more. So just take a moment. I can't define what that is for you, but I encourage you to take a moment and think about how that can enrich your life. So for our children, how do we make that happen? Well, I think one, we need to give them a sense of intrinsic values. And I'm not going to focus as much on that in this talk. I think during session 1, I focused on that pretty extensively. Just having values, shared values in the family of beauty and goodness and justice, right? Because in order for them to find anything intrinsically valuable, they have to have an appreciation for those values. So then expose your child to activities that they might find valuable. And these don't have to be expensive, okay? That's the other thing. You don't have to be, taking master classes with the best artist in the city in order to enjoy painting. And I think that's honestly, it's really something that plagues, I think, young parents nowadays. And I think some of it has to do with just all the social media connectivity, and we just are exposed to to so much greatness online sometimes that it can be hard to just do something for the process and the beauty of it and the goodness of it. So this doesn't have to be expensive or a big deal, but we should do things that we find to be intrinsically rewarding, and we can help our children in that process if we expose them to activities that we think might work for them, and then follow their lead to an extent. And by follow their lead, okay, I don't mean like if you have 4 kids that you're driving in 4 different directions every Wednesday night to be going to their own, professional track activities. I mean, make space in your home for flow. And I think that's something right now in quarantine that we're kind of being forced to do. And I hope that that's something that we will grow to appreciate and really incorporate into our lives after all this is finished. And Lord, may it be finished quickly. So, what else can we do? So we expose them to activities that they find valuable. We develop their sense of values. We follow their lead. We set them up so they can work at their ability level. And I would say, if it's an older child, like I would say, upper middle school to high school, you let them determine what that is. But younger child might need some help understanding whether they're trying something that's on their level. We don't want them in a place of frustration. There's something called the zone of proximal development. Okay, so not too easy, not too much of a challenge, but something that they can do independently and with full concentration without getting bored. Okay. So we make sure that whatever activity it is that they are involved in, that they have, they're doing it at an appropriate skill level for them. And, we make quiet and space in our homes and in our schedule. So how does this apply to right now? Well, in some ways, we may find it ironic that now that we don't have, in some ways, we don't have jobs in the same ways. A lot of us, I should, there are people reporting to work right now, so I don't want to paint everyone with too broad of a brush. But I guess what I'm saying is a lot of us who are stuck at home, whether we are working from home, whether we have lost our job, whether we are attempting to homeschool for the first time, where it's not really quite the same as homeschool, but you know what I mean, follow teachers' instructions at home. We do have more time that we have control over, okay? And we do have control over it, by the way. I mean, we might get assigned a whole lot at school, but I do think that in a time such as this, it's also our responsibility to communicate about what's realistic. I've had conversations with parents about some very, very intense school expectations, including a second grader who had 2 hours of Zoom class and then a 30-minute meeting with parents. And I mean, the child was just totally depleted and not really able to focus with that much screen time. So I guess the ironic thing is that a well-defined job is actually easier to enjoy than free time. And that's because those activities have built-in goals, they have rules for feedback, they have challenges, and we have a sense of accountability at our workplace and at school. And this time that is more unstructured, although it's an immense gift and opportunity, truly, it's hard, okay, but it's an immense gift and opportunity. It takes more effort to be enjoyed. So part of my question as well is, have we set boundaries in our home so that we have the ability to enjoy our children and to enjoy doing fun things with them, and perhaps have some of our own intrinsically valuable, beautiful activities? Or do you feel more like a maid or a chauffeur who never has a moment to think clearly about anything? I hope it's not always the second scenario that I described, but I know that many parents feel that way frequently. So One thing that I am going to humbly suggest is emphasizing chores with our children. Our children need to understand that our domestic church, if we're going to compare it to a boat, okay, it's not a cruise ship, it's not a luxury liner, it is a working vessel. And mother and father, we need time to have experiences that we consider intrinsically valuable. And our children also need that time. And the way that we do that is by all pitching in. So really a modest measure of work is a very appropriate and important part of childhood. We are well beyond the days of child labor, okay? I think perhaps, that was a real problem in the 19th century. And in my opinion, the pendulum has swung. It has really swung. And I think at this point, American children on average are not asked to do very much to help out around the house. And I'm not here to blame, okay? I think what we have here is a situation where people are at school for a long time every day, and then there's a lot of homework assigned, and then the extracurricular activities that kids are involved in can also be super demanding, okay? So it's like, if these teenagers, a lot of times during the school week, like if they're involved with chores, it's like 30 minutes if they're lucky. So parents instead pick up the slack, doing the work themselves, or paying to have someone else do it, or just letting go. And I hope that we can use this time to really do our best to transform our homes, not into a luxury liner, but into a working vessel. And, when things go back to normal, it's going to require that we set some boundaries in order to make it happen, in order for that to continue. But I really believe that it's the best thing for children, for families, to experience a little bit of physical work, labor. So, it fosters patience, cooperation, respect for the goals and values of the family, steadfastness, persistence in a particular task, maybe one that's maybe even boring, understimulating, definitely not as fun as a video game, but something that does have value. And if you have the right personality, maybe your child will even find some flow in doing chores. Certainly, I think we can give our children the best chance possible at taking some joy in tending for the home and taking some joy in keeping it clean. If we as parents don't moan about it ourselves, I know that's pretty key, but obviously it's still work, and that's okay. It's okay if it's not enjoyable all the time. So the thing is, you will get pushback at this time for assigning your child more chores. But I would also say that the earlier you can do this, the better. Habits take a while to form. I've heard a figure given once, 21 days is what it takes to form a habit. So earlier now in terms of our quarantine, and also earlier in terms of just in a child's development. And I want to share an image with you from Maria Montessori. It's a chart of age-appropriate chores. And this has been really immensely helpful to me, actually, to take a look at this. And if anybody wants it, feel free to email me. I will send it to you. My email is yaya, Y-A-Y-A at orthodoxky.com. But I know sometimes it can be overwhelming to think about, what your child can actually do at different ages and stages. But Maria Montessori, if you haven't heard of her before, she's a very famous educator, and she was just really keen observer of children and had a great appreciation for the importance of handiwork and the ability to learn while using their bodies. And she put together this list of chores that she feels like are appropriate at different ages and stages. So, even a 2-3-year-old can do things like put toys in a toy box, maybe learn to set the table, fold washcloths, fetch diapers and wipes, just little things like that. So I know that, assigning chores can be tough and will get pushback. But at the same time, I'm also very convinced that our children will feel more confident and really deeply more happy if they see themselves as contributing members of the family who are authentically relied upon. And I have a little anecdote for that, actually. Several weeks ago, probably 2 or 3 months ago at this point, I had lost my car keys, and we were going to be very late to school in the morning. And my son, who's definitely a creature of habit, was a little bit anxious about this. And I just asked him, I said, Johnny, can you help me find my keys? And he didn't want to do it at first just because it was out of his routine. Like, he was like, come on, we just get in the car. And convinced him to help me. And he ended up being the one who found the keys for me. And I said something like, oh, you're my hero. Yeah, that's what I said. You're my hero. And I found out that day when I went to pick him up from school that he had told the secretary at the school, he had told his kindergarten teacher, he had told his music teacher, he had told 3 different teachers that his mom told him that he was the hero of the family that day. And it's true, he was really authentically helpful. And it was such a joy for me to be able to rely upon him. And he, found great joy in that as well. So I think just giving those opportunities to our children is something that is good for us. Another reflection that I've had, I think the modern world really tells us oftentimes that children need to first be happy and then obtain skills. But I think that this is often backwards, okay? Yes, our children do need to be working in a way that's appropriate for their age and abilities, okay? That is true. But I would say, by and large, from my experience with children and teenagers, is that they become happy because they've obtained skills. And so I think it's really vital that we set the stage for our children to become skilled at something, okay? And that could be chores, like I was just mentioning. I would hope that it is chores. And then also just something that they find intrinsically meaningful, something that gives them joy and is going to give them that flow experience that I mentioned before, that I kind of likened to almost an experience of prayer that we can have. So some ideas. While we're in quarantine, we're going to need to embrace boredom. That means that we don't judge or scold our children for being bored, okay? And we don't demonize screens, okay? Because especially with teenagers, oh my goodness, they will pick up on the hypocrisy so quickly. We cannot demonize screens. It is possible to use them moderately, okay? So we're not going to judge or scold our children for being bored, but we also have to know deep down that while we can set the stage for them to have these experiences of joy and of flow and of working in God's presence, okay, we can set the stage for that, but ultimately they have to cooperate. It's between them and God. And I think the more we realize that, the less obligated we are going to be feeling to entertain them, and the less insecure we're going to feel when they tell us that they're bored. You know, we have these crazy thoughts run through our heads like, oh, I'm a bad mother or a father, or maybe I'm doing something wrong because my child is bored. No, we have to understand that really this is part of us giving them over to the Lord. This is part of our presentation. And it's in that boredom and in that challenge that they will meet God. So what are some examples of activities that I think could set our children up for achieving flow? Drawing, making art. This is kind of like a hybrid between tech. I had a friend, an old friend, we haven't been in touch in a while, invite me into this little Facebook group called Drawing Marathon. And she has come up with a fun little drawing prompt each day. And then kids from various ages, it's not super competitive or anything like that, but they do post their work in the group. So it's been really fun for my son to, make the drawings himself, and then he puts them up and he sees what the other children have done. And it's just turned into a really fun kind of encouraging experience in that way. I think that's something that you could set up with your own kids. And we've had all sorts of fun prompts. Like one of the children came up with it. So it was draw a robot chasing a chipmunk who stole his scooter. And then one was draw a pet that you wish you had, draw a neighboring galaxy. So there are a lot of really fun ideas that came up. But if coming up with the ideas feels overwhelming to you, you could probably turn it over to your child. You could also probably find drawing prompts on the internet, frankly. So that's a step for you as well. Practicing an instrument or singing as a family, cooking, gardening, going on nature walks, making cards for elderly or people who are shut in, maybe visiting friends at a distance. I say visiting, making a contact-free delivery of baked goods or a birthday gift. And I think that there are flow activities that are appropriately challenging that can occur with technological devices as well, okay? So things like coding. I know there's a bunch of, I haven't explored it as much, probably because it's just not very much of a personal interest of mine, but I hear that there's a bunch of really clever stuff that children can do to learn code. Video editing, graphic design. I would say anything that really puts the child or the teenager in the position of a creator and not just a consumer. And in that position of being a creator, right, they're reflecting God who created and gave them a beautiful mind and these beautiful hands and these beautiful skills to create alongside our Lord. So, all of these experiences do have very positive impact on our family culture. You don't have to go no tech, but I do believe that going low tech, especially with young children, and insisting in this time that they take some space to create is only going to be good for their hearts, for their souls, for their ability to concentrate, which is it's a big marker, frankly, of mental health and happiness and the ability to stand at prayer, you know. I once had a friend, I shouldn't say once, I still have him, but we're not, in touch very much anymore. His parents were very, very strict about technology and stuff growing up, and he didn't watch his first movie until like upper elementary school or something like that. And I asked him once, I was like, so what was that like for you? Like, do you feel like you were really sheltered? How was that? And he doesn't know Disney movies between like 1985 and 1995. But he didn't feel sheltered at all. In his family, there was an emphasis on traveling. They talked, they read extensively. They didn't shy away from hard conversations. They worked at a food pantry every Monday night. And in fact, he was a priest's son. So, there was some exposure growing up to just hardships that people in the parish were facing, and a real compassion for that. So no, he didn't feel sheltered at all. We don't have to feed our kids a steady diet of Disney or PBS or whatever it is for them to turn out normal. Not that normal is the goal, but I guess we don't have to do that in order for them to live lives that are fulfilled. We don't have to do that in order for them to see us as trustworthy, sources of information. We want them to turn to us in their time of need as they grow up. And I think that the more that we can cultivate a culture of playfulness and happiness and creativity in the home, right? The more that we can do that, the better. Because when they face hard times, our children, like the prodigal son, will have a safe spot to land on. And they will have someone to turn to in their time of need. And like the forgiving Father, we will embrace them, and they will grow so much stronger in their adult years for the rich experiences that we have given them at home. So these are my remarks for today. Thanks for listening.